Welcome, my bountiful friends. Grab a hot dog, a pecan-flavoured soda, and a copy of Boethius's The Consolation of Philosophy, because today we're going to be delving deep into John Kennedy Toole's Pulitzer Prize-winning black comedy, A Confederacy of Dunces. This comedy masterpiece is an anarchic, irreverent tour de farce that sits proudly as one of the most genuinely funny books of the 20th century. I'll be discussing the novel's background, observing its style and atmosphere, running through its plot, and exploring its central themes, as well as looking at its critical reception. There will be a copious amount of spoilers, and as always, this will be a completely subjective analysis on my own musings. So you have been warned. So let's settle down and begin our journey into the bizarro world of New Orleans' finest fictional citizens. Comedy's roots are often steeped in tragedy, and this is one such sorry tale. John Kennedy's career was tragically short. He was born in New Orleans in 1937 and died in Biloxi in 1969 at only 31 years of age, after having tragically taken his own life. A native son of New Orleans, he started out in humble beginnings, working in a Heinz factory, before being drafted into the US Army in 1961 for a 3-year stint. He spent that time teaching English in Puerto Rico to recruits, which already hinted at his natural high intelligence. After his discharge, he earned a master's degree in English at Columbia University, and then went on to become a professor of English at Hunter College in New York. Throughout this period, he was an aspiring writer, who would never live to see his work published, and his catalogue consists of only 2 novels, The Neon Bible and the book we're looking at today, A Confederacy of Dunces. He started it in 1963 and completed the manuscript in 1964 while in New York. The book got its title from a Jonathan Swift essay written in 1706, which stated, "When a true genius appears in the world, you may know him by this sign, that the dunces are all in confederacy against him." Toole poured his heart and wit into the manuscript, creating a satire set in his hometown of New Orleans that reflected his sharp observations of human behaviour and society. However, he failed to secure the interest of any publisher, being told repeatedly that it was unmarketable and too unconventional. Rightfully assured of her son's genius, his mother Thelma convinced fellow Columbia graduate and Southern writer Walker Percy into reading the manuscript. Percy was astounded by its brilliance and helped get it published in 1980, over a decade after John Kennedy's death. Having watched an interview with Thelma, a link of which I have included in the description of this video, I would have to say that if she had paid me a visit and insisted that I print the book, I would have immediately said, "How many copies would you like, ma'am?" She was clearly not a woman to be trifled with. A year later, the novel won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. Today, the novel stands as a testament to Toole's writing talents and his mother's tenacity to get justice for her son. The main characters in A Confederacy of Dunces are a colourful and eccentric group, each beautifully contributing to the chaos of the story. They form a vibrant tapestry of New Orleans life and contribute to the novel's biting satire, absurd humour, and critique of societal dysfunction. Ignatius J. Riley is the protagonist. He's a 30-year-old obese layabout who still lives with his mother in New Orleans. He is a highly educated man, yet has not put any of this education to use whatsoever. He appears content to merely exist in a state of perpetual delusion of grandeur, seeing himself as a misunderstood intellectual, set upon by the vagaries of a cruel society. He's eccentric, arrogant, lazy, and deeply critical of almost everything. He writes elaborate, scathing diatribes against modernity in his Big Chief writing tablets. Believing himself to be a crusader for higher moral values, Ignatius's misadventures drive the plot as he stumbles from one messy situation to another, often causing problems for everyone around him. Irene Riley is Ignatius's long-suffering widowed mother. She is a kind but somewhat gullible woman who feels burdened by his antisocial behaviour. She's caring and well-meaning, but often pushed to her limits by his selfishness and eccentricities. Much of the story could be said to be occurring due to her finally developing a sense of independence and a need for a life of her own. Irene sets the plot in motion by pressurizing Ignatius into finding a job. Myrna Minkoff is Ignatius's former college classmate and unwanted pen pal, whom he both admires and detests in equal measure. Myrna lives in New York and is a self-proclaimed social activist. She is outspoken, politically liberal, and just as self-righteous as Ignatius is, and is in many ways a mirror image of him. She regularly writes him unsolicited letters that reveal her opinions about him and the broader societal issues she cares about. She questions his character and repeatedly suggests actions to improve his contribution to society. Their contentious relationship highlights their opposing ideologies and mutual delusions of superiority. Patrolman Angelo Mancuso is a hapless police officer who is constantly assigned ridiculous tasks by superiors as a direct result of his initial contact with Ignatius. He's well-meaning but unlucky and incompetent. He struggles to prove himself as a capable officer while being humiliated by his job on a daily basis. Claude Robichaud is an elderly conservative man who befriends Irene and is interested in courting her. Being an upright citizen, he is stern and highly critical of perceived communists in society, but is generally kind towards Irene. He supports her as she begins to assert independence from Ignatius and becomes in many ways her crutch. Lana Lee is the owner of a seedy bar and nightclub called Night of Joy. The bar is mediocre, and she dreams of becoming wealthy via crime, in particular by distributing illegal pornography. She's shown to be a ruthless, manipulative and immoral person who exploits various people for her own gain. She serves as one of the novel's antagonists and is the only character that suffers a definitive unhappy ending. Burma Jones is an African-American janitor who works at Lana Lee's bar under exploitative conditions. Being a level-headed realist and well acquainted with the life in the city, he is cynical in attitude as well as intelligent and resourceful. Through Jones's eyes, the reader receives sharp commentary on both racism and inequality. He ultimately gets justice against Lana by exposing her criminal activity. Dorian Green is a flamboyant and openly gay man who lives in the French Quarter and throws wild parties. He's charismatic and carefree, in contrast to Ignatius's prudish and judgmental personality. His parties and social circle become part of the chaos surrounding Ignatius. I suspect that Toole named and based several aspects of this character in relation and homage to the character Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. The story starts and stays in 1960s New Orleans and quickly centers around 30-year-old oddball Ignatius J. Riley. His main achievement at this point in his life has been completing a Master of Arts in Medieval Studies at Tulane University. He sees himself as an intellectual genius who is surrounded by fools. He despises the modern world he lives in and generally views other people with contempt. He is very much an anti-hero. The plot kicks off with a scene where Ignatius is very nearly arrested for being a public nuisance. His long-suffering mother has to intervene and rescue him. They then go to a bar to celebrate this brush with the law, and on the return trip, his mother, somewhat drunk, accidentally damages her neighbour's property by driving her car into it. This is the catalyst for all the subsequent events in the novel. The cost of the damage is substantial, and Irene's financial situation is precarious. This prompts her in demanding that Ignatius get a job to help pay off the debt. Reluctantly and half-heartedly, he makes motions to join the workforce in order to placate his mother. But he attempts to self-sabotage his employment chances at every turn, so that he can return to his indolent life as a sponger and layabout. When and wherever he is unfortunate enough to secure employment, he causes chaos. He works initially at Levy Pants, where he tries to stage a workers' uprising amongst the largely African American workforce. They fortunately see him for the idiot he is and do not follow his lead. He is subsequently fired. He then becomes a hot dog vendor and proceeds to wander aimlessly about the streets of New Orleans while eating much of the inventory himself. Meanwhile, a cast of colourful characters intersect with Ignatius's misadventures and subsequently generate more chaos themselves. These characters weave in and out of his orbit, creating a wild and comedic tapestry of life in New Orleans. Eventually, Ignatius's bizarre and unprofitable behaviour is discovered by his boss, Mr. Clyde, and he is duly fired. Rather than look for another job, Ignatius opts instead to try and return to loafing at home, but his distraught mother has grown tired of his ways, and looking to be finally free from him herself, and following the advice of a new suitor as well as her neighbour, she arranges for him to be committed to a mental institution. The novel ends with Ignatius narrowly escaping this situation by being rescued by his nemesis Myrna, who offers to whisk him away to New York, where she hopes that the change of environment to some place where intellectual and artistic pursuits are appreciated will enable him to find purpose and some maturity at last. What makes a Confederacy of Dunces so unique is its style and atmosphere. Toole's writing is richly detailed and vividly captures the essence of New Orleans, from its bustling streets to its eccentric residents. The city itself feels like a character, providing a vibrant and chaotic backdrop to the story. The novel is a black comedy farce that blends highbrow and lowbrow humour to critique social norms, capitalism, and human folly. The narrative oscillates wildly between absurd comedy and biting social commentary, creating a tone that is both entertaining and thought-provoking. It weaves in and out of regular everyday society and the criminal underworld that exists just below its surface. Ignatius's verbose and pompous dialogue contrasts hilariously with the straightforwardness of the confused people around him. He speaks a different language from them, and he lives in his own world, separate from both regular and criminal worlds. The character of Ignatius and Irene appear to be an inverted mirror image of John Kennedy and his own mother, Thelma. John was a very intelligent and well-educated and thin man, and Ignatius appears to be an alternate version of himself. Ignatius is obese, slovenly, and does not use his education or knowledge for for the betterment of himself or others. Instead, he misuses it to sneer at and pretend to be better than his fellow man. Ignatius is perhaps a perfect example of a person being a visibly worse individual than the average person, despite their supposed superior intellect. In the novel, perhaps it is an instance of an absurd man meeting an absurd world head-on, with neither party understanding where the other is coming from and neither giving quarter to the other. Ignatius ultimately loses and is forced to flee, because despite the force of his own personality, he is still only one man and society is legion. And thus, we can perhaps say that the novel ultimately explores individuality versus conformity. In regard to Thelma and the character of Irene, the latter is long-suffering, vulnerable and naive, the mirror opposite of the former, who appears very much to have been a force to be reckoned with, who brooked no fools. We have nothing to say what the son and mother relationship was actually like, but it could have been a feisty one. John would not have been able to take liberties with his own mother the way that Ignatius does in the book. Again, I would expect that it was the polar opposite. Thelma would probably have instructed her son on how things were going to be under her roof. So I suspect Toole got the principal idea for the novel's setup from supposing two central characters with a reversal of their personal qualities. What else can we say about the themes of this novel? A key theme is societal dysfunction. Toole portrays a world filled with incompetence, hypocrisy and absurdity, where every character reflects some form of human weakness. The novel also touches on issues of class, race, sexuality and power dynamics, particularly through characters like Burma Jones, who works under exploitative conditions, and Dorian Green, who is a free-thinking, liberated gay man who is forced to exist beneath mainstream society. Ultimately, the book examines the human condition with both cynicism and compassion, showing us that life is as messy as it is meaningful. Since its publication in 1980, A Confederacy of Dunces has been celebrated as a masterpiece of American literature. Critics have praised its sharp wit, complex characters and brilliant satire. The novel won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1981, cementing its place in literary history. However, its legacy is not without controversy. Some readers find Ignatius just too obnoxious an individual to root for or even tolerate. The humour is often dark too, as it finds amusement in twisting a situation through either the subversion or the fulfilment of societal norms. Those that enjoy the novel often see it as a perfect encapsulation of the absurdity of life. Despite differing opinions, the book remains a staple in literary studies and a beloved classic for many. Surprisingly, it has not been successfully adapted into either film or TV to date. This could be due to a whole host of reasons, any of which would frighten off a film or TV executive. The novel directly pokes fun at the absurdity of modern society, which would perhaps make it uncomfortable viewing for the majority. It also points out the prevalent injustice and moral intolerance towards race and sexuality of American society at that time, which again may be unpleasant watching for a high percentage of the viewer demographic. And then there's the fact that it's populated almost entirely by a cast of oddballs and eccentric characters who would be almost completely unrelatable to most viewers. Humour is a risky and subjective business at the best of times, and perhaps A Confederacy of Dunces contains just too many such challenges to make it a viable comedy film or product in contemporary times. Nonetheless, I will end by saying that the novel's influence has probably been indirectly profound on both literature, TV and films for decades since its publication. Its influence can be seen in contemporary satire anywhere where truly bizarre characters are engaged in screwball situations to the astonishment of onlookers and the resistance to societal norms through acts of comedic anarchy. A Confederacy of Dunces is more than just a novel. It's a journey into the absurdities of life, society and human nature. Whether you love Ignatius or just find him insufferable, there's no denying the brilliance of John Kennedy Toole's storytelling. The book is the perfect antidote for situations when your own life is less than perfect and you're going through your own trials. Enter this fictional version of 1960s New Orleans and you will meet a cast of characters who in all likelihood are having a far worse day than you. And they often stop to question why their circumstances are the way they are too. They are good companions to have. And the fact that literary agents and publishers had comedy gold given to them in their hands, only to reject it as unfunny and troubling, stands testament to the principle that we should never invest our own sense of self-worth in the opinions of others. And the character of Ignatius himself perhaps shows us that we, for our part, should try and avoid walking around our own neighbourhoods as delusional, obnoxious know-it-alls with high opinions of ourselves. The novel even ends on the sage advice to jump to a fresh location when the heat becomes too hot in your own hometown and the threat is on its way to your own front door. In all, this is a unique and intelligent novel that has plenty to say about the human condition and makes the reader laugh at the same time, provided of course you're not the sort of individual who takes themselves and their surroundings too seriously. So, what are your thoughts on this black comedy classic? Have you read it, or are you planning to? Let me know your favourite scene in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that bell icon for more deep dives into the world of literature. Until next time, keep reading and keep laughing.